Ghost ships, navets animaux, are ships that are found floating adrift with its crew missing. Just gone, as in they've never been seen again. We don't really know what happened to them, and honestly, there's a minuscule chance we ever will. It's really just a big mystery, and if you're a guy like me who loves unsolved shit, these ghost ships are pretty awesome. Probably the most famous ghost ship, excluding the Flying Dutchman, is the Mary Celeste, a brigantine that sailed out of New York City to deliver 1,700 barrels of alcohol to Genoa, Italy, on November 5, 1872. On board the ship was Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife and 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7 others. Before setting sail, Captain Briggs met an old friend in New York named David Morehouse, a captain of another brigantine named the Dei Gratia. They had dinner together, just having a good time. Both men had a pretty similar course, but they couldn't leave at the same time, as Morehouse was waiting on his cargo to arrive. The Mary Celeste left the next day, and the Dei Gratia left either 7 or 8 days later. We don't really know. During the next month, a lot of bad weather had been reported in the Atlantic, but the Dei Gratia hadn't actually encountered anything really that bad. It was a pretty uneventful month for them. However, on December 4th, or 5th, again, we don't really know, the helmsman of the Dei Gratia discovered a ship around 5 miles from their port, and realized something wasn't right with that ship. The ship wasn't going straight through the water, and its sails were slightly torn. The helmsman reported this to his second officer, who then reported it to Captain Morehouse. They went to investigate, and yep, you guessed it, it was the Mary Celeste. The Dei Gratia crew were keeping an eye on the Mary Celeste for around 2 hours. Nobody was seen on the helm or on the deck, and they eventually figured out that, yeah, she was drifting. The chief mate of the Dei Gratia boarded the Mary Celeste and found nobody on board. The ship was a mess, had only 1 operational pump, and over 3 feet of water were in the hold. The ship was not sinking though, and quite frankly was still worthy of traveling the sea. Things found on the ship include the captain's logbook, a clock that wasn't working, a destroyed compass, a rope tied to the ship with the other end trailing in the water, a 6-month supply of good food and water, and all the personal belongings of the crew. All the alcohol was still there, though later it was discovered that 9 of the barrels were completely empty. Missing from the boat was all the ship's papers, a marine chronometer, a sextant, the peak halyard, and the ship's only lifeboat. There are so many possibilities to what could have happened to this crew. We have theories like piracy, though that's not really the best theory because, again, their personal belongings were all on board as well as all that alcohol. There were theories of tsunamis, there was bad weather reported, a water sprout, a mutiny, though mutiny isn't really the most popular opinion. Maybe they abandoned the ship prematurely, or maybe everyone just got completely wasted. 9 whole barrels of alcohol were missing. The most accepted one of these theories is actually an explosion, though really, I don't know what the fuck. It has something to do with the fact that red oak barrels could have caused a spark with the white oak barrels, and really I just don't know. And quite frankly, even if I did, we never really will know what happened. It is a pretty awesome story though. Flashing ahead around 135 years later, there's another much more recent ghost ship that people have actually compared to the Mary Celeste, the Kaz II. The Kaz II was a yacht owned by a man named Derek Batten, who took his neighbors, James and Peter Tunstead, out on a trip from Airlie Beach to Townsville, Australia on April 15, 2007. It only took 3 days before a helicopter saw the boat and reported that it was heading towards the Great Barrier Reef and the crew might be in distress. 2 days later, maritime authorities caught up to the boat and they discovered that everything on the boat was fine, everything was perfectly normal, except the 3-man crew was nowhere to be found. The engine was running, everything was fully functional. The laptop computer was left on, food was set up on the table. All the life jackets were still on board. The only thing that was really off was one of the sails were slightly damaged. A fishing lure had been entangled in the ship's portside rudder, and there was no lifeboat, though we really don't know if they even had a lifeboat to begin with. The Kaz-2 was brought into Townsville for forensic examinations, and they found no evidence of foul play. They analyzed data from the ship's GPS system and say that on the day the ship left, the ship steered towards the northeast, going off of the route they had planned. On that same day, the GPS also showed that the ship was just floating adrift, presumably showing it wasn't very long before the crew disappeared. Even a video recording of the crew on the day they left was found, showing the men on board doing their own things. The engine was off and the fenders were out. All 3 men were just gone. They disappeared. The search started and they were never found. There are several theories as to what happened. One theory is that since the fenders were out, another boat may have docked with them and may have taken the crew. Though again, there really weren't any signs of foul play, so that may not be the best conclusion. Another theory is that they got stuck on a sandbar near George Point, the area in which they had last radioed in their position, and jumped overboard to try and push it free. A gust of wind, though, may have blew the boat away, leaving them stranded. Maybe a big wave had blown one man overboard and the others tried to save him, but to no avail. Maybe they had some difficulty during really rough weather, though a problem with that theory is that everything on the ship looks much too tidy for something like that to have happened. In the state coroner's official report, the belief is that since a fishing lure had been found tangled in the portside rudder, one of the men on board tried to free it, but fell overboard while doing so. One of the other men tried to rescue whoever went overboard, while Batten turned on the motor of the boat before realizing he needed to drop the sails before he could turn back. As he went to do this on his own, a change in the ship's course could have easily knocked him overboard. With nobody left on board, all 3 men were doomed to the sea. But again, we don't know. Anything could have happened. And that's what makes these ghost ship stories really, really interesting. What happened to these people? Why were their ships left abandoned? There are so many ghost ship stories like these ones, and they're all kind of spooky when you read about them. Ships like the Beichimo, a ship that hadn't been salvaged and for 38 years was seen floating adrift by many people before never being seen again. The Carol A. Deering, a schooner whose crew disappeared, and there has been explanations from piracy to paranormal explanations. The Octavius, a ship that supposedly had been drifting amongst ice for 13 years, with a completely frozen crew still on board. They're all incredibly interesting, and I just love reading about them. They're awesome. Fucking creepy to read about when it's 2 AM though.